in raising a question that I'm going to be talking to you, a lot of people brought up this topic, probably because Eric Weinstein talked to Joe Rogan recently and said that he and you were contacted by folks about UFOs. Can you clarify the nature of this contact?
Yeah.
That you were
Well, I mean,
contacted about?
I've got very little to say on this. I mean, he has much more to say. I think he went down this rabbit hole further than I did, which wouldn't surprise anyone. Um, he's got much more of a taste for this sort of thing than I do. But I think we're contacted by the same person. It wasn't clear to me who this person was or how this person got my cell phone number. Um, they didn't seem. It didn't seem like we were getting punked. I mean, the person seemed credible to me.
And they were talking to you about the release of different videos on UFOs.
Yeah, and this is when there was a flurry of activity around this. So there was a big New Yorker article on UFOs, and there was rumors of congressional hearings, I think, coming, and there were the videos that were being debunked or not. And so this person contacted both of us, I think, around the same time. And I think he might have contacted Rogan or other. Eric is just the only person I've spoken to about it, I think, who I know was contacted. And the what happened is the person kept, writing a check that he didn't cash. Like he kept saying, "Okay, next week I'm gonna, I understand this is sounding spooky, and you have no reason to really trust me, but next week I'm gonna put you on a Zoom call with people who you will recognize, and they're going to be former heads of the CIA, and people who just you're going to within 5 seconds of being on the Zoom call, you'll know this is not a hoax." And I said, "Great, just let me know. Just send me the Zoom link, right?" And I went. That happened maybe 3 times. There was just one phone conversation, and then it was just texts. That's just a bunch of texts. And I think Eric spent more time with this person, and I haven't spoken to him about it. I know he spoke about it publicly, but so it's not that my bullshit detector ever really went off in a big way. It's just the thing never happened, and I lost interest.
So you made a comment which is interesting, that you ran which I really appreciate, that you ran the thought experiment of saying, okay, maybe we do have alien spacecraft, or just the thought experiment that aliens did visit.
Yeah.
And then this very kind of nihilistic, sad thought that it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't affect your life. Can you explain that?
Well, no, I think many people noticed this. I mean, this was a sign of how crazy the news cycle was at that point, right? Like we had COVID and we had Trump, and I forget when the UFO thing was really kicking off, but it just seemed like no one had the bandwidth to even be interested in this. It's like I was amazed to notice in myself that I wasn't more interested in figuring out what was going on. It's like, and I considered, okay, wait a minute. If this is true, this is the biggest story in anyone's lifetime. I mean, contact with alien intelligence is by definition the biggest story in anyone's lifetime in human history. Why isn't this just totally captivating? And not only was it not totally captivating, it was just barely rising to the level of my being able to pay attention to it. And I view that, I mean, one as to some degree, an understandable defense mechanism against the bogus claims that have been made about this kind of thing in the past. The general sense that it's probably bullshit, or it probably has some explanation that is purely terrestrial and not surprising. And there is somebody who, what's his name? Is it Mick West? I forget. Mm-hmm. Is it a YouTuber?
Mick West, yeah. He debunks stuff.
Yeah, he done. I mean, I have since seen some of those videos. I mean, now this is going back still at least a year, but some of those videos seem like fairly credible debunkings of some of the optical evidence. And I'm surprised we haven't seen more of that. Like there was a a fairly credulous 60 Minutes piece that came out around that time, looking at some of that video, and it was the very video that he was debunking on YouTube, and his video only had like 50,000 views on it or whatever. But again, it seemed like a fairly credible debunking. I haven't seen debunkings of his debunkings, but
I think there is, but he's
yeah,
basically saying that there is possible explanations for it.
right.
And usually in these kinds of contexts, if there's a possible explanation, even if it seems unlikely, is going to be more likely than an alien
Yeah.
civilization visiting us.
Yeah, it's the extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence principle, which I think is generally true.
Well, with aliens, I think generally, I think there should be some humility about what they would look like when they show up.
But
I tend to think they're already here.
the amazing thing about this AI conversation, though, is that we're talking about a circumstance where we would be designing the aliens,
Yeah.
and there's every reason to believe that eventually this is going to happen. Like, so I'm not at all skeptical about the coming reality of the aliens, and we're going to build them.
Now, here's the
Yeah.
thing. Does this apply to when superintelligence shows up? Will this be trending on Twitter for a day and then we'll go on to complain about something Sam Harris once again said on his
Yeah,
podcast
right,
next day?
yeah.
You tend to trend on Twitter, even though you're not on Twitter, which is great.
Yeah, I haven't noticed. I mean, I did notice when I was on, but
You have this concern about AGI, basically, same kind of thing, that we would just look the other way. Is there something about this time where even like World War III, which has been throwing around very casually, concerningly so, even that, the news cycle wipes that away.
yeah. Well, I think we have this general problem that we can't make certain information, even you know, unequivocally certain information, emotionally salient. Like we respond quite readily to certain things. I mean, as we talked about, we respond to the little girl who fell down a well. I mean, that gets 100% of our emotional resources. But the abstract probability of nuclear war, right? Even a high probability, even an intolerable probability, even if we put it at 30%, right? Like it's just like that's Russian roulette with a gun with 3 chambers, and it's aimed at the heads, not only your head but your kid's head and everyone's kid's head, and it's just 24 hours a day. And I mean, I think people who this pre-Ukraine, I think the people who have made it their business to professionally to think about the risk of nuclear war and to mitigate it, people like Graham Allison or William Perry, or I mean, I think they were putting like the ongoing risk. I mean, just the risk that we're going to have a proper nuclear war at some point in the next generation. People were putting it at something like 50%, right? That we're living with this sword of Damocles over our heads. Now, you might wonder whether anyone can have reliable intuitions about the probability of that kind of thing, but the status quo is truly alarming. I mean, we've got ICBMs on. I mean, leave aside smaller exchanges and tactical nukes and how we could have a world war, based on incremental changes. We've got the biggest bombs aimed at the biggest cities in both directions, and it's old technology, right? And it's vulnerable to some lunatic deciding to launch or misreading, bad data. And we know we've been saved from nuclear war, I think at least twice by, Soviet submarine commanders deciding, I'm not going to pass this up the chain of command, right? It's like, this is almost certainly an error, and it turns out it was an error. And it's and we need people to. I mean, in that particular case, like he saw, I think it was what seemed like 5 missiles launched from the U.S. to Russia, and he reasoned, if America was going to engage in a first strike, they'd launch more than 5 missiles, right? So this has to be fictional. And then he waited long enough to decide that it was fictional. But the probability of a nuclear war happening by mistake or in some other species of inadvertence, misunderstanding, technical malfunction, that's intolerable. Forget about the intentional use of it by people who are, driven crazy by some ideology.
And more technologies are enable a kind of scale of destruction.
And misinformation plays into this picture in a way that is especially scary. I mean, once you can get a deep fake of, any current president of the United States claiming to have launched a first strike, and just, send that everywhere.
But that could change the nature of truth, and then that might change the engine we have for skepticism. Sharpen it. The more you have deep fakes.
And then we might have AI and digital watermarks that help us. I mean, maybe we'll not trust any information that hasn't come through specific channels, right? I mean, so like in my world, it's like I no longer feel the need to respond to anything other than what I put out in my channels of information. It's like there's so many people who have clipped stuff of me that shows the opposite of what I was actually saying in context. I mean, the people have like re-edited my podcast audio to make it seem like I said the opposite of what I was saying. It's like, unless I put it out, you can't be sure that I actually said it. I mean, it's just. But I don't know what it's like to live like that for all forms of information. And I mean, strangely, I think it may require a greater siloing of information in the end. It's like it's we're living through this sort of Wild West period where everyone's got a newsletter and everyone's got a blog and everyone's got an opinion. But once you can fake everything,
there might be a greater value for expertise.
Yeah,
for experts, but a more rigorous system for identifying who the experts are.
Yeah, or just knowing that it's going to be an arms race to authenticate information. So it's like if you can never trust a photograph, unless it has been vetted by Getty Images, because only Getty Images has the resources to authenticate the provenance of that photograph and attest that it hasn't been meddled with by AI. And again, I don't even know if that's technically possible. I mean, maybe whatever the tools available for this will be, commodified and the cost will be driven to zero so quickly that everyone will be able to do it. It could be like encryption,
and it would be proven and tested most effectively first, of course, as always in porn.
Yeah, right.
Which is where most of human innovation technology happens first.